And we are recording. Welcome, boys and girls, cats and dogs. We are an inclusive channel here. And today we have Peter Davis, whose Instagram ID is, let me see if I can get it, Dr. Knitfix and Coffee 2.0. Tell us about that. Tell us everything there is to know about you.
Everything there is to know about my handle will go first. It was Dr. Netflix and Coffee because I love knitting and I love Netflix and I love coffee. But then someone hacked into my account and changed it so I couldn't get back in. And my friends knew it wasn't me because they were sending out porn, lesbian porn, like, that's not Peter. And so I had to get Netflix, or not Netflix, I had to call Instagram and get them to shut down that account. So now I'm 2.0, and fortunately I have authentication, so no one's gotten in yet, but people have tried since I changed it up. So that's about the Netflix handle. About me, I live in Salem, Oregon. I love it here. I lived in Europe for a while until I was 12, and then moved to the United States to Southeast Idaho, Pocatello, Idaho, which is a really small Mormon town.
I know a song about Pocatello, Idaho.
Judy Garland has a song
exactly.
About yes, I was
born in a trunk in Pocatello, Idaho. Yeah.
Nothing that interesting has ever really happened there. And so in Pocatello, I lived there from 13 on, and then I ended up going to Idaho State University. I got a degree in Spanish and International Studies and a minor in Women's Studies. And I did a lot of study abroad to Puerto Rico and Mexico, which was fantastic. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I did what lots of folks do, which is hit that snooze button on the alarm clock of life. And I went to graduate school. And I got a master's in public health and one in anthropology, and still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I worked for a couple of years, and then I found my passion, which is working with youth. And so I ended up getting my MSW from Northwest Nazarene University. Now, I'm a queer Jew. That was definitely an experience. It was
Nazarene University?
Nazarene.
Wow.
But they were getting accreditation at that time, so they tokenized me, and they're like, all right, here we are, we have diversity. I'm like, yeah. But it turned out fine. And then I moved to Salem because my partner got a job here in Salem at Hewlett Packard. He got transferred. And so we moved to Salem, which I've always loved Oregon and I've wanted to live here. And then I ended up getting my doctorate in behavioral health from Arizona State. And so now I teach at a community college at Portland State, and I have a private practice where I work with queer youth and do lots of trauma stuff, healing of trauma. And then I knit and crochet and watch Netflix and drink coffee in my free time with my two Labradoodles, who you may see running in here once in a while.
Oh, that's cool. I totally admire people who work with queer youth, who do any kind of social work. At one point, I wanted to do that myself. Didn't really work out, but yeah, total admiration. So, I mean, you have a wonderful Instagram. It shows how rich and varied your life is. I mean, you've got the yarn stuff, but you've got so many other things going on.
Yeah, I mean, my Instagram, I spend lots of time on Instagram and lots of time on Facebook. Just because I can interact with people, but not really interact with them. I mean, being a professor and a therapist, when I get home at the end of the day, I still want that interaction because I'm pretty extroverted. I'm kind of like one of those super extroverts, but it's nice just to have it with some control over it. So my Instagram, I do a lot of yarn stuff. I do lots of social justice stuff, really lots of speaking truth to power and that sort of stuff, but then also cooking and baking. I've always loved cooking and baking.
I was just looking at some of your food pics and thinking, is it lunchtime yet?
It's fun. No, I love it. I love social media. Some people are anti-social media, but I actually really enjoy it. And I think it can create these really fantastic communities, especially when you live in a place that maybe doesn't have a community that you're looking for that's very big. And so I think of my queer youth, right? Like I came out in 1993 or 94, and I was 16 in Pocatello, Idaho. There were no queer youth that I knew of. And it would have been so lovely to be able to have a community, even if it were a virtual community, right? Knowing that I'm not alone. And so now I really do appreciate social media. I think like everything, there's good and bad. But the community of knitters and fiber arts people that I have met and that I know, I mean, it's just fantastic and super supportive, and really have a lot of those same values that I have in terms of equity and working toward just a better world. And so I love it, and I get excited.
Aren't yarn people wonderful?
They're fantastic. And then I see them, I meet them in real life, and it's like I've always known them, which I love.
Exactly, yeah. And I agree with you about social media, because it's like any tool. It's how you use it. And people can use social media for ill intent, but I hope there's not as much of that as there is of people using it for good intent and for connection.
Absolutely. And I actually love having it, because I work with lots of my clients on setting boundaries. And it's often the first place that we really look at in terms of setting boundaries, because oftentimes those consequences aren't as difficult as if you were to set them in person. So we practice setting boundaries in the virtual world, and then we move into the real world. So I think it can be a really useful tool in a lot of different ways.
I can see how that would be really great, especially with young people,
Oh,
because they've always had social media. And when I was in college, we didn't even have personal computers. I typed my college papers on an IBM Selectric, and I say that, and people don't know what an IBM Selectric is, but then I'm very, very, very old. But yeah, it's great. I mean, it sounds like you're doing just wonderful work. It sounds like you have a charmed life, really.
I'm pretty blessed and pretty privileged. Yeah, and being a professor is the best thing in the world, because I get to hang out with these amazing folks who want to do better in the world. I teach addiction studies and social services and social work stuff, but then I'm also fortunate enough at Portland State, I teach a class called Queer Families, which is fantastic. And we look at families through a queer perspective. And then I got my dream job. Like, I'm never going to get better than this. It's called American Families Through Television and Film. And I love TV. I'm like one of those people who people are like, what would you like to do more of in your life? I'm like, I would like to watch more TV. And so like, this was just like the best class ever. So, I have them watch these amazing pieces of American work in regard to family and film, and then we discuss it. I'll never get a better job. It's the best gig in the world.
That sounds wild. And knowing a lot of entertainment history, I can see how portrayals of the family, especially in this country, have really changed over the years. I mean, look at Father Knows Best compared to Family Guy,
right?
Or The Simpsons. I mean, there's one moment from The Simpsons that still sticks with me, and it was when Homer tried to do this one sort of entrepreneurial thing, and it didn't work out, of course. And he says to Bart, "I hope you learn something from this, boy." And Bart said, "Can't win. Don't even try." Yep, got it.
Yeah, The Simpsons are fantastic. That writing is like fantastic and so ahead of its time in a lot of different ways. And yeah, and the thing that I love about teaching it now is there's lots of people of color and queer people that are being portrayed in TV that have never been portrayed in this way before, right? It's like queer people and people of color writing the narratives of those characters that they're going to play. And so like Reservation Dogs is my new favorite show. It's fantastic. It takes place on the reservation, and native actors who are just amazing. And,
Wow.
oh, so good.
And I can remember when it was like, hey, look, everybody, we have a colored person on our show just this week, though. You know, so yeah, and you won't remember this. There, Diane Carroll had she was a lead in a sitcom in the late 60s, early 70s, and it was revolutionary. It was a sitcom about a single mother. Of course, she had to be a widow, not a divorcee. But she was a working woman, a single mother, and she was a black woman. And
Oh,
that was revolutionary at the time. And I was a kid. I think she had a young son, and I think I was maybe a year older than the son in the show. So I really, really identified in so many ways. But at the same time, I didn't understand in so many ways what was special about it, because to me, she was a regular mom, and he was a regular kid.
sure.
But then at the time, I was living in Minnesota, where diversity is having Swedes and Norwegians in the same room.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a very white place in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
When I think of Minnesota.
But yeah, actually, my family's from North Carolina, and that's where I am now. So
Yeah.
diversity is a very different issue here,
Yeah, absolutely.
especially since we have had all of the United States. We have had um, people coming to our country from so many different parts of the world. And there are places in the US that are not as eager to accept, let us say, outsiders as
Mm,
others.
I mean, I think the United States has always been a really xenophobic country, unless you were the colonizer, right? And when we talk
Mm-hmm.
folks who are not accepted, they're people of color. We're fine with Canadians and we're fine with Europeans as long as they look white. I mean, when it comes down to it, I think a lot of it is this issue of racism and the color of a person's skin, not so much the fact that they're not from the United States, but the fact that they don't look like what people from the United States think they should look like.
Exactly. Exactly. We could talk for hours about that.
Yes. Yeah.
But let's talk about yarn.
Let's talk about yarn. I love
Yarn
yarn.
makes us happy, usually, unless it pisses us off.
Yeah. I've had those moments.
So, what are you working on now?
So right now I'm working on just a pair of socks. So I do a pair of socks a term. Um, and so this term, this is just the socks I'm working on. And I love socks
It
for
looks like a teeny
reasons.
tiny bra.
I know it's a nitsy bitsy teeny weeny little purple and black bikini. Um, no, I love socks because I can take them anywhere. I'm actually teaching from home this term because of COVID. But typically, like I have my students watch videos and stuff, and I'll work on them in class. But I love this yarn that I'm using. It's beautiful. It's by Alexandra, and she's a dyer here in Oregon. She's a local dyer, and she's brilliant. And this is like I think the dark side of the moon yarn. And I bought this.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah, I bought it during the eclipse. She did like all of these yarns for the eclipse. And so I love socks. I always do 2 at a time, toe up. I use the Turkish cast on and then the fish lip kiss hill. And I have it memorized now, which is another plus of doing socks, right? Because I don't have to sit there and look at um, a blueprint of it of how to do it. I can just kind of do it from memory. But
Well,
she's one of my favorite dyers.
knitting is a mystery to me, so I don't understand the thing that you've just said in the past 60 seconds. But the yarn is beautiful. Do you like to use hand-dyed yarns?
I love hand-dyed yarns. When I first started out, so I actually got into knitting because of therapy. I had my own therapist, and my own therapist was like, you need to find yourself a hobby that you can do without interacting with people, because no matter what situation you go into, you're a therapist. And she was right. Like I was watching The Walking Dead and I saw Carl, who's the little kid on there. And I'm like, I could do good work with him in trauma. Like I always had my therapy brain on. And so she's like, you need to find some sort of hobby. And so I ended up getting really into knitting. I took a class at Joann's actually. And it was this lady. And then I crochet too, but just not as much. And so I got into it and I didn't realize there was this whole yarn culture around it. And then I went through this rabbit hole on Ravelry and then from Ravelry to Etsy, and just really got really lucky in the fact that I met some really great yarn dyers like Della from Lola Beans Yarn, who's brilliant. And Gina from Beach Bum Yarn, and like just started buying from them just randomly because their yarns really popped out. And the difference was like amazing in my work, right? And then I started really seeing my work as being kind of a collaboration between the yarn dyer and myself. And once I started looking at it that way, it kind of changed the way how I really wanted to create stuff.
So then you never went through the budget yarn phase where it's like, okay, I'll use this stuff because it's cheap. And then you're going, well, it's not nice as that stuff. But that stuff's more expensive. So,
Yeah.
But I can buy more of this stuff that's not as nice. And then,
I was in the budget yarn phase for a long time, probably for about a year, because I just didn't realize there was anything better. Yeah, and then just looking at Ravelry, like getting on there, and then looking at people's yarn stashes, because I never really looked. How they have like the little stash thing on Ravelry where you can go in.
Yeah. You see people on YouTube with yarn walls and yarn rooms.
Oh no, I have. Oh, let me see if I can show you here. It has to move my computer. That's my little yarn stash right there.
That's pretty respectable.
Yeah, it's not bad. I do tell my partner though that each one was only like $5. So if I die, you have to show him this podcast because he can probably sell it off and retire.
Yeah. Since I started off with the budget yarns, but my tastes have grown more posh as time goes along. My budget has not. So I have to make choices sometimes.
Yeah. What's your favorite weight to crochet with?
I used to say I was a worsted boy, but I'm getting more and more into DK. Or, sometimes I find that a lot of manufacturers, they'll call something a 4 that I would call like a 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
Or they'll call something a 4 that I might call a 4.5.
Yeah, I find that worsted and Aran, they go back and forth. Like sometimes the worsted is a little more bulky than I think a 4 should be, and the Aran is a little more thin.
Yeah, exactly. So I do a lot with like Lion Brand Mandala because I love the self-striping cakes, and their DK weight 3. And they usually work perfectly for my designs. Do you design stuff yourself?
No, that's like one talent I just don't have. I have pretty bad ADD. And so like the thought of designing something scares the hell out of me because it's so detail oriented. I'm halfway decent at following directions. And strangely enough, with like Fair Isle, I'm fantastic because it's always changing and it keeps my attention. But just to sit there and think about designing something, I would have to come up with the idea and then hire someone who's a designer, I think, to design it. I am good at making like little changes though with designs and patterns. Once I know a pattern pretty well, I feel more comfortable with like changing it around. Rather it's like adding something or taking away something, but just coming up with something on the fly, no way.
That's actually how I got started though. It's just I was working with a design from somebody else, and I was making so many changes. Like, oh, I like it better this way, and I like it better that way. that by the end, it was more my changes than the original pattern. And I thought, hey, I've got something new here. And so I published it. And people in my circle liked it. And then I've been going ever since. So it's, everybody has their own way into designing. I think that you probably could do it. Um, I mean, you might just, I mean, if it interests you. If it doesn't, then don't bother. But um, I'll bet you could, because God knows you've got the smarts. But I think you've got the creativity too,
Yeah.
and the spirit for it.
I may try it someday. I guess at this point I just haven't been inspired. I mean, because I find like there's so many beautiful patterns that I want to work up that maybe I just haven't taken time to think about really what I want, because I see something I'm like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Um, so yeah, maybe that is in my future. Who knows? But that's
Yeah.
probably how I'll go on it, is I'll see something and then want to modify it somehow to make it my own.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting now that I do my own patterns. I have less patience to do other people's patterns because I keep thinking, oh, I need to be working on something new of my own.
Yeah.
Even though I have some really good patterns that I've bought from other people, um, some of which I've worked up completely, some of which I've started and stopped midway. Um, but then I get going with, okay, I need to do something new because I need to do more patterns, more patterns, more patterns. Because you wanna you wanna make stuff,
Yeah, it's kind of your legacy.
including money. Yeah. Yeah.
What type of patterns do you typically do? Like,
Well, the ones that are the most popular on my Ravelry store are the shawl patterns. I have a bunch of shawls and wraps. I do a lot of hat patterns, but the hat patterns I make available for free.
mhm.
I started doing that when I was very active in the Hat Not Hate project.
Oh yeah, that's a great project.
Yeah, so I sent them off like 85 blue hats that I had made myself.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so I still make my hat patterns available for free. They're either on Ravelry or on my blog. I think they're more on the blog than on Ravelry because some of the free ones I just haven't bothered to put up on Ravelry. I probably should. Um, but I love doing shawls because you don't have to worry about gauge.
Hmm.
But my most recent project was a cardigan.
Oh, how did that turn out?
Um, Very well, actually. If you look at my Instagram, you can see some recent pictures of it. And I just yesterday wrote up the pattern. So, having written it yesterday, I have to go back to it today to just make sure that it's okay before I send it out to testers.
Yeah.
So, I always, whenever I was writing for, what's a Texas thing, using whenever instead of when. Um, when I was writing papers for school or anything, I would always want to finish it early so I could go back and proofread it after having like a night's sleep or something. Not that I ever sleep. Um, just a little time away, and then you come back to it. Um,
Yeah.
you probably have had the same experience with publications.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah. And then sometimes I get into this thing where even when I come back to it, it looks perfect to me. And then I know like something is wrong with it. And that's when I have to send it out to someone else.
Hmm.
Because I think sometimes you just look at it and it just, everything looks good, yet you know there's like mistakes in it. And so that's
Yeah.
those editors and testers and all of those amazing.
Exactly. Actually, I have some excellent testers who will point out things that because I in the corporate world I was a business analyst. I was
Mhm.
like the liaison between the technical people and the business people, and I had to write documents that both sides understood.
Yeah.
Um, Requirements documents for like technical projects. Um, so it hurts me deeply whenever I write something that is not clear, but I know I have to go through it. Um, and I have some really good testers who will help me to make things more clear. And I really, really value them. They think they're being pests. They apologize every time. And I say, no, this is exactly what I need.
Yeah.
But especially the ones who think they're being pests because they're giving me the information that I need.
Yeah, to clear it up.
So we're talking too much about me. Um, so then you were talking about like a healing or a therapeutic value in your knitting, and later on, I guess your crochet as well.
Yeah, I love knitting and crocheting because it is to me very very healing and very therapeutic. And I've taught it to clients actually as a type of meditation in a sense. And so
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, I worked with gang members, and I love working with gang members. They were just amazing and fantastic and brilliant. And I would teach them to crochet hats. Um, and that mindfulness that you have when you're crocheting, and then going back with them and looking at their stitches, like, oh, this one's tight, talk to me about what was going on there. And just being able to have something grow out of a piece of yarn, it's like magicians, right? And they
Mm.
got really into it. And I think for myself, I just love it because I can create amazing things. And I never sell any of my knitting, because to me that would put so much stress on me because I'd have a different expectation of myself. And so I knit and I give it away, but I never tell people I'm going to give them something. I just knit it and then give it to them because, again, I don't want that extra expectation on me. Um, and I actually I've gotten into baby sweaters, and I really love baby sweaters because they're really cute and they're really quick, and
And
babies are not
fun.
very judgmental and fun, right? And you can give them to the baby, and I don't feel like they have to be as perfect as I would make it for an adult or anything else. And everything looks good on a baby. I mean, it's hard to go wrong. So I do lots of baby sweaters, and I just like the idea of that. And then of course socks, like I wrote this post about why I love doing socks. And I love doing socks because they're kind of really symbolic, I think, of life, right? Like you create them and then you wear them and then they wear out. And it's like relationships in your life, and you can decide to mend them or to just kind of let them go. And then you have
Wow.
comparing a new pair to it,
I
right?
wish I wish I knew about your face. That was on Facebook.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I wish I knew about your Facebook before because I like most of the people I interview, I found you through Instagram because you have such really cool photos. And I mean, I saw the title Doctor, and I'm going, "Ooh, he brings in something interesting to the equation." Um, but um, yeah, I would love to read that post. So and also in the description, I will post any links you want me to include, so
Oh,
that people will um, and also send me any photos that you would like me to sort of work in to
sure.
the edit. But yeah, the healing property. Two things. One, I knew an art therapist. Sort of lost touch with her. She used to work with at-risk youth, um, which that's a label loaded with meaning. But she would teach them to crochet. And she said that some of her toughest boys were like the most proud of the hats that they made for themselves.
Yeah. I saw that with my gang kids. Like they loved, they were very proud of him. Um, the one thing we did have is I got to choose your color because certain gang members wanted certain colors. Like, I want blue, I want red. And I'm like, so you can either have pink or let me choose something I think would look good on you. And most of them were pretty happy with letting me choose. They were fantastic. They were funny. And, I think that for lots of folks, when we talk about meditation and mindfulness exercises, they think that it's sitting there in the lotus pose, repeating the phrase over and over. But I really think you can be mindful and do meditation with anything that you do, right? It's just being in the moment. And I really think for lots of folks that I know, the fiber arts really allow that. And so to be able to take young people who thought that meditation was something totally different and then say, no, you can meditate and also create this amazing piece of art is really mind blowing for them. And for lots of adults too, of like, oh, I've tried meditation my entire life and I really can't get it. And then to be able to be like, no, this is a great stress management technique that will help you to create something and also help you to be really mindful. It's like a win-win in so many different ways.
I have spoken to, in fact, for this interview series, I've spoken to guys who are like combat veterans who took up yarn, either crochet or knitting, usually crochet, to help them with PTSD issues. And they found it incredibly healing. And now they're spreading the evangel of yarn, if you will. I talk to people in other realms of life who refer to it as a prayerful practice. And it is. I mean, I've read about, everyone has that, I hope that everyone has that sort of thing where you lose yourself, you lose track of time, and you're like totally focused. And I think neurologists call that theta waves in your brain, and that can happen with yarn work. It used to happen to me on the piano bench, but that sort of thing happens, and that in itself is really healing, and everybody needs that in their lives in some way. Don't always recognize it, don't always have time for it if they're like, struggling to make a living and feed their families. But everybody needs it in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we are mindful enough as a society, I think. So I mean, I admit, like I told you, I love me some television. So I will often put on, it seems Law and Order has been my go-to. The original Law and Order with Sam Waterston has been my go-to.
I loved that show.
It was fantastic. Yeah, I loved
I
it.
used to sing at a church in New York City, and Sam Waterston would come every now and then. Yeah, it was actually known as the Actors Church because,
Nice.
well, there's a long history there, but the Episcopal Actors Guild was centered there, headquartered there. So occasionally we'd get entertainment figures there, and so Sam Waterston was there. One year, Mr. Rogers was there. I don't remember why or when. But every year, anyway, talking too much about me. Stop me when I do that. But
hearing about it, no, he's fantastic. But I mean, I like to knit and watch TV, but then sometimes I just like to knit, and that's the me time where I'm there and I'm focused. And I love that veterans are using fiber arts to manage their trauma. When we look at trauma, we know that trauma is an anxiety disorder. And so what I find fiber arts does for a lot of people is to ground them. And when you're grounded, you have that logical part of your brain working rather than the emotional part that the anxiety and the trauma deals with. And so like oftentimes I will tell folks who I'm teaching fiber arts to handle that anxiety, that it's almost like the yarn is like a lifeline. It's a link to being grounded. And they really are able to get that because it's so tangible and so easy to do once it clicks for them and gets it, and can really lower, I think, anxiety and can help with depression and lots of things that those theta waves and the different parts of our brain really sometimes struggle with, especially with COVID and everything else going on.
Oh yeah, the whole pandemic has brought it in like it's like totally blindsided us with all of these other factors that we never thought about before. I mean, and so many people, actually, a tremendous number of people have picked up yarn and other kinds of crafts because, well, partially because they were bored out of their minds,
Mhm.
because they were stuck at home, but also because they needed an outlet.
Yeah. I think with arts, rather whatever the art is, or your artist, your medium, I guess would be a better word for it. Um, During times of intense emotion is often when we create the most amazing works. And so, I mean, during the pandemic, although the pandemic has absolutely been devastating for the world, I've also seen these amazing works of art come out, not only in the fiber community, but also with theater and painting and all different types of mediums. And I just, yeah, it's beautiful and tragic all at the same time.
Sort of like life.
Pretty much exactly like life.
Yeah. Um, I mean, and lately I've been watching a lot of British history documentaries, and I come up upon particularly some that lead up to the two world wars and uh, how the UK coped with it. And it's amazing the ability that people have to cope and adapt, um, and just do what needs to be done. And there are always going to be people who run around with their hair on fire, but
Mhm.
then they're going to do that no matter what happens.
Right.
But there are going to be people who will just roll up their sleeves and do what needs to be done.
Mhm.
And um, part of that is caring for each other, and part of that is caring for ourselves. I saw a saying, actually, it was just this morning, that says, um, and of course it escapes me, something along the lines of, "You can't, you can't fill another's cup if yours is empty." Something like that.
Yeah. I think as humans, and this is both good and bad, right? But we're taught that to be selfless is a virtue. And I don't always think it's a virtue. I think that sometimes you have to be selfish and put up those boundaries in order to be able to help others. And we're not very good at that sometimes, especially when it comes to people that we are close to. So, that filling your own cup and making sure that you are well enough to be able to help others is of the utmost importance. Sorry, my dog just came in, so you
Oh,
may
that's
see
okay.
a big
Yeah. Actually, we just adopted a dog last week, a 10-year-old Cocker Spaniel. So we're
oh,
learning how he acts, and he's learning about us still. But uh, I I often think that being selfless is an escape mechanism, is a defense mechanism in itself. It's a way to do denial.
oh yeah. Well, once you're selfless, you really don't have to deal with your own issues.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So you can
And you
go
get to also think of yourself as selfless. Look what I'm
out,
doing for everybody else.
and you can often come off as kind of like a martyr, right? Like, oh, they worked so hard until they died, which who doesn't want martyrism? It's a great thing to have. Like, wow, you get
Oh
lots of
well,
and all that.
unless you're one being burned at the stake.
Exactly. That's when it doesn't go so well.
Yeah, yeah. And that stake can be metaphorical, and
Mhm.
so can that fire.
Absolutely. And so can the martyrism too, right? Which this
Mm,
always is.
exactly. Exactly. Gosh, you're fun to talk
Yeah, you
to.
talked well.
So, let's talk about social media. No, you've got your Instagram, you've got your Facebook. How long have you been doing the Instagram? I think you mentioned it,
Um,
but I've forgotten. I have a mind like a sieve, a really
wow.
cute sieve.
I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years. Like I said, I had one, and then I had to erase it because it got hacked into. But lots of those pictures are up there still. Like I just reloaded them up.
Hmm.
I have a couple knitting pictures at the very beginning of stuff that I knitted. And I've been doing Facebook for maybe 10 years. I go through Facebook phases. Right now I'm really into Facebook. And my Facebook name is Waffles Ilana RTEP, which is Peter backwards. And I do that because I have clients that try to find me and students that try to find me. And they don't need to know that much about my personal life. So if you find me on Facebook and add me, I'll definitely add folks. My Facebook is pretty open. I am very political and I do swear quite a lot. So if that's something that
I
offends,
knew I liked you for a reason.
I drop the F bomb every other post pretty much, and a lot when I teach. And actually it keeps a lot of their attention. So
Uh,
just FYI, if you add me, you're going to get lots of very left political stuff, knitting, and pop culture.
Funny how all the intelligent people are on the left. Wonder what that's about.
I don't know.
Hmm. Anyway, I probably lost about half of my viewership with that statement, but if they stayed this long, actually, people really do like it. When I have a really great conversation with people, they give me great feedback. Sometimes they tease me because they say I always get really good-looking men, and I always flirt with them. I don't know why they would say that.
Well, they won't say it about this one.
Oh, I think they will.
You're very kind.
You haven't seen flirting yet, believe you me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. When I click end record, that's when it's gonna start.
I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, I think like I'm so like I have these friends who are on Grinder. I mean dating apps, but they're also hookup apps and all of that. And I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know if I would know how to date if I weren't with someone right now. Like it's so, or even flirt, right? Like to me, flirting would be like fashion. I think I would try it, but I would do it poorly. Like it would just not come off right. I'd be like, oh, so that shirt looks like it was weaved by, something. And be like, what? So yeah, I'm just like, yeah, I don't even like even when I was younger, I was not good at the flirt thing. But one of the things that like I think is really interesting, which I work with lots of queer youth and we talk about cruising. I mean, it just comes up in the conversation. And today's younger folks have no idea what that is because of the hookup apps. I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. It's definitely like a generational thing that happens. But I think like part of that is so much of gay culture that we are losing, that we're really also losing that social piece of being able to interact on a face-to-face level that's not over apps and meeting people. I mean, we used to meet people, right, by either cruising or by going to the bars. And
Mm.
lots of that is being lost. And it's really sad. But I'm loving, like I know in New York City, and I know in Seattle as well, which is about 5 hours from where I live. And I know San Francisco, they're having these gay knitting groups of gay men, which I would love to live to a place or near a place where I could go to something like that, right? Just that
Um, they
art.
also there are men's fiber retreats.
Yeah, they just had one in
Um,
Washington. I want to go. It's on my bucket list, but I'm always like preparing for class during that time.
uh, well, I'm going one in upstate New York later this month. Um, at the Easton Mountain Resort, and I used to go there. There used to be a Labor Day gay men's retreat there. I used to call it therapy camp.
Nice.
Um, um, and actually, it started at another retreat center in Western Massachusetts, and then it split in two, and people went wherever their allegiances went.
Mhm.
Um, and then, so I know the retreat center, but this will be my first time at any kind of a fiber retreat. And there's another one here in North Carolina, on the other side of the state, like 6 hours drive away, in November that I'll be going to. I'm looking forward to that as well. But both of them, the one in New York involves a trip to a sheep and wool festival, and the one in Western North Carolina involves a trip to a very well-known local yarn shop. Both times I need to leave my wallet behind.
Yeah. I No, I'm kind of like a yarn whore. I will like I'm always like I do not need any more yarn. I'm going to knit all of this up. But then like I go to a yarn shop, and that's what I do when I visit places is I like to go to the yarn shops.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I need just to take a piece of it home with me. And then I really love the local dyers. And so my partner's from Albuquerque or from New Mexico, but we go down there quite a lot, and they have a wonderful yarn shop. It's called the Yarn Shop on Nob Hill. And they have a section just of local dyers. And we just got back maybe about 3 weeks ago. And I was like, I'm not going to buy any yarn. Yeah, it kind of broke my bank a little bit.
Yeah.
Secret yarn stash.
There, I remember with my ex, we used to do that a lot when we traveled. We would go to local yarn shops. One time in New Orleans, I found I think it was a package kit for an Afghan with all the yarn and the pattern and everything. And it was really, really colorful, which I really respond to color. So I wanted to buy it for him. But I was broke. And I wound up using the joint account to buy it for him. And I felt so bad. But he actually, I think he finished making it. He said that the colors were so bright that it hurt his eyes when he was working with it. But the first time we ever went to one I think it was the first time we brought him here to Wilmington. We were living in New York.
Mm-hmm.
We went to a local yarn shop here, and the old ladies were just astounded that here were these two men walking into a yarn shop.
Yeah. I've experienced that, not so much here in Oregon. I think Oregon's pretty progressive, and when I go into a yarn shop, like I feel like I'm treated like any other customer. Same with New Mexico, but I'm going back to Idaho at the end of October, and so I'm going to be going to yarn shops there. And I just am not an Idaho fan, but I have family that lives there. So it'll be interesting to see how I'm treated there. There's definitely a different social.
Well, I'm sure you've observed this as well. There's a lot more openness about men who do yarn now. Like even in the past 10 years, it's an amazing difference.
Yeah, there seems to be like a burgeoning culture of it, and I love that. I think it's great, and I think again, this is where social media is fantastic, right? Because we can connect. And I mean, I knit everywhere. I take my knitting to classes. I take it in the airport, coffee shops, places like that. And I mean, people are curious about it. I've never had anyone be like a jerk about it or make any comment. They're usually really just curious. And then lots of women tend to come up and talk to me about knitting, which I love, right? I can talk about knitting forever. So it's fantastic. It's a great conversation starter. And so I know that lots of high schools now are getting like fiber arts clubs, which is really exciting for me.
I didn't know that about high schools.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah, a couple here have them. A couple here in Salem have them. I know at Chemeketa, where I teach, there's actually even a fiber arts club. We don't have a art department per se because it's a community college, but there's like a knitting and crocheting club, and I love it. The students who are in it are fantastic and brilliant, and they're just it's fun. So I think there is like this really popular resurgence of it, and yeah, I just hope it continues because I don't want it to be one of the lost arts or anything like that. You know, I think fiber arts are such an important part of humanity and who we are, our clothing and how we create things and how we dye things and all that.
Actually, if you look at it, an anthropologist or a sociologist could look at the history of fiber arts and see how the evolution mirrors every other um, field of endeavor in the Western world, where it started out with men like
Mhm.
doing uh, like fishermen doing nets and doing their own sweaters and socks for like fishing at sea or for whatever they had to do in the field. And then when they started thinking of it as drudgery, that's when they passed it off to women. And then it became a woman's thing. And then now men are reclaiming it and saying, look how great I am because I do a woman's thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's breaking gender roles in lots of different ways. I mean, we saw knitting really become this luxury sort of pastime when the Industrial Revolution happened and we got factories and we were able to mass produce. And then it became more of like a luxury thing. And now we see this resurgence of knitting and fiber arts as a way to kind of test those gender roles. And there's a group in Argentina, Los Hombres Tejedores, and there's one in Mexico and Chile, and they're like my favorite. I love following them and their main folks on Instagram. And I mean, that's what they do. That's part of their mission as a community is to really break stereotypes of gender roles. And it was a fantastic way to do it. If you haven't checked them out, you should. They're amazing. And the folks who are in charge of it are just really fantastic crocheters and knitters, and they have pictures of them in parks just sitting there, and it's going into summer down there, so they're going to be posting a lot more. That's like one of the things on my bucket list is to go knit with them one day. It'd be fantastic.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Yeah, that's I've never been to a male specific knitting group, but I've been to like community at like a local yarn shop. There would be once a week what they would call a stitch and bitch, where you
Mhm.
just gather and do whatever yarn stuff. And I always felt guilty because the one I went to here in Wilmington was in a really really nice, very posh yarn shop. I couldn't afford to buy anything there, but I would go and have fun, and I felt like I was not being fair to the shop owner, who was a very nice lady, because I never bought anything. But I was there with my budget yarns and doing my stuff.
Yeah, it's hard because I've done the same. I've been in the same scenario when I was in college, and it seems like folks recognize that. The people that I've been around who've done that, they recognize it. That you want to be there, that you can't quite, but if you could, you would. I think is the change thing. But now, like, what's interesting is we have yarn groups here, but I don't go to them because I have clients that attend them, and I don't want that dual relationship.
Oh
So
yeah.
typically, when I knit, if I'm lucky enough to be able to have time, I get on there's a men's knitting group. Joe Wilcox, who's fantastic, who's pretty well known.
He's coordinating this Northeast Men's Fiber Retreat.
Yeah, he's such a sweetheart. He's such a kind person. I really appreciate him. He's the one who typically runs that. And so if I have time, which I haven't lately. I love to hop on there and just see what everyone's making, and all the fellows are pretty nice.
That sounds like fun. That sounds like fun. I haven't, well, because of what's going on in the past couple of years, I've been very much socially isolated, so I haven't really been to groups of any sort. Um, but I miss the knitting groups. I did find a local yarn buddy actually because I
Oh,
was at the optometrist, and while I was waiting, I pulled out a project bag and started crocheting something. And one of the women who worked there is also crochets, and so she's my new local yarn buddy, and we talk a lot. We do stuff together, and she's always giving me stuff. She's ridiculously generous.
uh,
So I'm not going to tell her to stop.
no, why would you? No, that
Of
sounds
course.
great.
But yeah, it's good to have a local yarn buddy. I mean, when I was still with my ex, he was my local yarn buddy. But
Yeah,
yeah, no longer. Although we're still friends. But he's still in New York, and I'm in North Carolina now.
makes it hard, that distance, even if you're friends.
We He got into sewing. He sent me a wonderful project bag made with puppy fabric
Oh,
because he knows I love puppies. And
yeah.
it was lined in purple because he knows I love purple. So it was very nice. And
Oh,
so we send each other things every now and then. His birthday is coming up. I'm gonna try to see him when I go to New York. Have to contact him and figure out that. But yeah, still friends.
that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean that's another road we could go down and talk for hours. But yeah. So okay, when you're not being a absolutely brilliant teacher and therapist and not knitting, what else do you do?
Um, like truthfully, not much. Well, like I said, I love baking and I love cooking.
I'll give you my
I
address for cookie packages.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah.
We have our neighborhood. I love our neighborhood. It's very, there's a lot of Latinx people here, lots of Mexican migrants who come here. And so of course, like I have my hand in everything because I like to know what's going on. And I love the Mexican culture and I love speaking Spanish. So I'm pretty good friends with most of my neighbors, and they have little kids. And I say little, like, 10 and under. And they're always like, "So what did you bake today, Peter?" And they're so much fun just to, I mean, it's nice to be able to bake because, like, I have this theory that you can't bake just a little bit of something for it to taste good. You have to bake a shit ton of it, right? Like, the more you put in
That's
there,
how I am with soups and casseroles.
exactly. Yeah. And they're always better the second day, too,
Of course.
of
I have
course.
something actually. I need to split it up and put some of it in the freezer. Something I made the other night, a really, really good chicken soup
Oh, yeah.
that you wouldn't think of making at the end of the summer, but I sort of felt a soup coming on, so I had to do it.
Yeah. I love chicken soup like anytime. We have a place on the coast, and the Oregon coast is really cold. Like, rarely does it get ever above like 70 degrees. And so one of the things that I love is that it's always soup weather and always knitting weather, right? Because
And
it'll be like,
chili and stews and
yes,
casseroles. Oh my god!
coffee, it's so good. And
Oh, I will come visit.
yeah,
I will make stews and casseroles. You will bake. We'll do yarn stuff,
we
and
will knit and kvetch. It'll be so much fun.
and probably drink, and it'll be fun. Yes, every one of the men I have interviewed, nearly everyone I have wanted to meet in person and visit, and spend that kind of quality time with.
Oh, that'd be fun.
So,
Yeah, the
I'm
house is open. It'll be great.
sorry.
Your dog, bring your dog. They can play with my dog. They can play with my dogs. It'll be a good time.
Uh, well, I don't know. He probably wouldn't like a trip
Oh yeah, that's a
to
lot of.
Oregon. He's 10 years old. He's got arthritis, so we're going to look into different kinds of supplements to sort of uh, work on his joints. But, sort of set in his ways too. He doesn't like to be held. He
Oh,
likes scritches though, and boy howdy does he like um, food. But he likes scritches. His little tail wags when he sees me
oh.
because he knows he's either going to get scritches or food. I think he wants the food more than the scritches, but
Yeah, no, I totally relate to that.
we've only had him for like a week and a half, so it's a learning process.
Yeah, still acclimating.
Yeah, exactly. And I haven't had a pet in. Well, I say that for a while I was living with a friend. I went to Texas for a while. He was very active in a pet rescue there, and he had two dogs of his own, and was always doing temporary fosters. And
Mm.
I would get attached to the temporary fosters and fall apart when they had to go on to their. Uh, uh, and he, of course, would take that. My friend thought he was a social worker, so he would always tell me that I was doing grief wrong.
Yes,
Um,
I will tell you that there's no right way to do grief, or no wrong way either.
yeah, well, that's not the way he thought. The right way apparently was his way. Not that I'm bitter. Um, anyway, uh, I know he's not going to watch this. He's not that interested in my life. But oh, yeah. I would always. Some of them I would get more attached to than others. Some of them were needed some socialization training. Those temporary fosters.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, and usually they just had to have a little time to get over some sort of a brief illness, like a kennel cough or something, before they went on. And this group in near Dallas, they did great work. They would, because apparently Texas is overrun with strays,
Hmm.
and they would bring them in and take them to adoption events in northern states, and they had a really high success rate with adoptions.
Wow.
So, I mean, I'm all about pet rescue. That's
Yeah.
one of my passions. So, again, I'm talking too much about myself. Stop me when I do that.
No, I love animals. I could animals. I think they're just like so therapeutic in themselves, right?
Oh, definitely.
And I mean, I love people, but at the end of the day, I love when my doodles climb up on me and they just lay their head on me, and it's just me and them, and
I
lifetime TV
wish,
and all that.
yeah, I wish our old guy was comfortable, climbing. He doesn't get up on the sofa. He
Yeah.
doesn't climb up on either bed. He just rests on the floor because he's got the joints.
It's an old man.
Although I'm told a cocker spaniel can live 18 or 20 years.
Yeah, I think they live a pretty long time. I know when our dog had arthritis, I think they recommended, I think it's called glucosamine. It gives them,
Yeah, I think we're giving him a treat twice a day that has that.
okay.
Someone in one of my live streams recommended another brand of treat and told a wonderful story from her own experience with that particular brand. So I ordered some. It should come this week.
Okay.
That I'm going to try out, just to see how that works. Because you want to see him acting like he enjoys life. I know he enjoys food and he enjoys scritches and he enjoys sleeping and he
Something.
enjoys pooping.
Yeah. Well, I hope he feels better. Maybe
Oh, I'm sure
become his
he'll be
young
okay.
self and be jumping all over you, and it'll be.
That'll be fun. Yeah. I'm sure you've seen like pictures. I think it was used in some sort of a commercial, that sort of thing, or similar kinds of pictures where like a very young boy is like a toddler age is like overcome by a pack of golden retriever puppies and just
Yes.
giggling all over the place because they all want to lick his face.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I envision, although it's been a long, long time since I was a toddler. But
That sounds fantastic at any age, though.
it sure does.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think we deserve dogs. Like humans are not good enough for dogs. They're just too amazing for us. So,
Well, one thing they say is that the reason the dogs have shorter lives is that the real reason we're here is to experience perfect love, and dogs do it so much more quickly that they can move on more quickly.
oh, that's beautiful. I love that. I can see
I
that.
mean, I've seen it stated much more poetically than I just did, but it's that's the gist of it. Yeah,
Makes sense.
it does. It does. We've been going at it for over an hour. Who would have thought it?
Wow, that went by quickly.
I did. I've had such a wonderful time talking with you. And I hope that we will talk many times offline as well.
You too. It's been a pleasure.
So, what would you like to conclude with? What would you like to tell our viewers?
What would I like to tell your viewers? I would like to tell your viewers to, when you are choosing your fiber arts, to make sure that you always have intent, because it will make your craft a lot more enjoyable. I think a lot of times we start going into stuff and we don't quite have an intent about where we want to go or what we want to do, but kind of having some sort of roadmap will make everything a lot less overwhelming, especially if you're just getting started.
We touched on that for just a second, and I wanted to get back to it because that is such a wonderful way to think of things. Um, we'll have to do another conversation. We'll have to record another conversation.
I have so much to say all the time. So
That's not a surprise. But anyway, okay. So thank you so much for joining me, and thank you to all my viewers who are still here. All the standard, what I say: like, subscribe, comment, share, all the standard YouTube crap, and keep coming back. Okay, I'm